The cabin lights were soft, the air filled with that usual mix of recycled air and quiet anticipation. Passengers were still settling into their seats when a sharply dressed black man approached the first-class section. His presence was calm, but confident, the kind that turns heads without him needing to say a word. But before he could even reach his assigned seat, a flight attendant stepped in front of him with a tight smile and a dismissive tone. "Sir, this section is for first class. Passengers only," she said, not even bothering to check his boarding pass. What followed wasn't just awkward, it was humiliating. Despite having a first-class ticket in hand, he was treated like he didn't belong, questioned, and eventually pushed toward the back of the plane. Some passengers watched in silence, others whispered, assuming he was in the wrong. But they had no idea who he really was, because the man they just shamed wasn't just any traveler. He was the CEO of one of the airline's biggest partners, and in just 30 minutes, the entire flight crew's fate would be hanging by a thread. What happened next wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. A quiet conversation, a phone call from 30,000 feet, and suddenly, everything began to change. The looks on the crew's faces when they realized the truth, that's when the real turbulence began. But what exactly did he do on? Why did the airline regret every second of it? Let's dive into the full story. His name was Marcus Delaney, a self-made tech entrepreneur turned CEO of a global logistics company, one of the airline's most critical corporate clients. He wasn't wearing flashy jewelry or walking with an entourage, just a tailored suit, a carry-on bag, and the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to shout. But to the flight crew, none of that seemed to matter. What they saw, or maybe chose to see, was someone who didn't look the part of a first-class passenger. As Marcus sat silently in a coach seat he hadn't paid for, he didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a brief message to his executive assistant. Just a few lines, but those few lines were enough to set off a chain reaction that would reach boardrooms, contracts, and higher-ups before the plane even landed. Meanwhile, in first class, his rightful seat remained empty. The same flight attendant, who had turned him away, continued serving wine and hot towels, unaware that the man she dismissed had the power to impact her career overnight. Other crew members, equally unaware, laughed and joked, moving through the aisles as if nothing unusual had happened. But every minute that passed was closing the gap between ignorance and reality. Back in coach, Marcus watched quietly, his mind not on revenge but on principle. And with every mile in the air, the weight of what had just happened grew heavier, because this wasn't the first time, but it might just be the last dot in the back of the plane. A young woman seated across the aisle from Marcus kept glancing at him. She had seen the whole thing unfold, how the crew had dismissed him without even asking his name, how he didn't fight it, how he just quietly complied. She worked in corporate law and recognized him instantly. She even whispered to her husband, "That's Marcus Delaney. He runs Deltec Freight. They practically keep this airline running." Her husband raised an eyebrow. "Then why'd they treat him like that?" She didn't have an answer. Up in the galley, the lead flight attendant was casually chatting with a crew member about difficult passengers, calling Marcus a seat jumper who probably got lucky with a standby upgrade. The tone was smug. No one bothered to verify the facts. The crew was more focused on getting through the flight than treating every passenger with dignity, especially one who didn't fit their assumptions of a first-class traveler. Meanwhile, back on the ground, Marcus's assistant had already forwarded the incident to the airline's partnership director. Within minutes, text chains and email threads were buzzing. A VIP passenger being displaced without protocol, and not just any passenger, one who had recently renewed a multi-million-dollar service contract. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a major misstep. As turbulence rocked the plane lightly, the unease among the unaware began to grow, and while the rest of the passengers prepared for a smooth landing, something much bigger was heading for impact, the kind of storm no one saw coming. The plane began its slow descent, and the cabin lights flickered as passengers adjusted their seat backs. In coach, Marcus remained calm, his fingers loosely wrapped around his phone. From the outside he looked unfazed, but inside, years of quiet endurance were boiling under the surface. He wasn't angry just for himself. It was the pattern, the looks, the assumptions, the subtle message that no matter how far he'd come, he'd always be questioned. Up front, the lead flight attendant checked her watch and rehearsed her landing. Routine. She still hadn't realized her world was about to shift. Neither had the co-pilot, who had casually dismissed a ping from headquarters earlier, assuming it was routine. But buried in the system logs was a flagged message marked **** urgent. VVIP incident ****. Flight 293 names, faces. The dots were starting to connect as the wheels touched down. Marcus received one final message from his legal team. "All ready, your call." He didn't reply. He just closed his phone and gave a slight nod. The young woman across the aisle noticed, leaning in with a look of cautious curiosity. "Is everything all right?" she asked. Marcus gave a polite smile. "It will be." The crew began thanking passengers, smiles plastered on, unaware that two airline executives were already waiting at the gate. They had been pulled from a meeting the moment the name Marcus Delaney had come up, and now, With cameras in the terminal and a growing crowd near the arrival gate, the pressure was building. Something was about to happen. As the aircraft doors opened with a mechanical hiss, passengers began to gather their belongings, unaware of the quiet storm waiting just outside. Marcus stayed seated, letting the crowd shuffle past. The lead flight attendant offered a quick thank you for flying with us, still oblivious, her tone practiced and empty. But as she turned back to prep the galley, she noticed something unusual. 2 sharply dressed men in suits had stepped onto the jet bridge. Their expressions weren't friendly. They flashed badges, but not for security. They were airline executives, and they were here with purpose. Then came the second twist. One of the passengers filming the earlier incident, Tan, off-duty pilot from another airline, had posted the clip online. The footage was short but sharp, a black man in a suit being told he couldn't sit in a first-class seat, despite holding a ticket. No shouting, no scene, just quiet humiliation. By the time Marcus stepped off the plane, the video had already gone viral. Phones were buzzing. Social media was heating up with phrases like racial profiling on a flight, CEO denied dignity, and corporate power meets discrimination. Airline staff began whispering. The same attendant who had dismissed Marcus now stood frozen, watching the 2 executives approach him with tight smiles and lowered voices. She still hadn't pieced it all together, but her gut was starting to catch up. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't speak. He simply walked with the executives, his steps calm and deliberate. The stakes had shifted, and now, everyone was watching. Marcus walked through the gate flanked by the 2 airline executives. The terminal buzzed with low murmurs. A few passengers began recognizing him now, not from the flight, but from the headlines starting to pop up on their screens. The executives guided him into a private lounge near the concourse, where several senior managers had already gathered, faces tense, backs straight. They all knew they were no longer in control of the narrative. One of the executives cleared his throat. "Mr. Delaney, we want to begin by offering our sincere apology." But Marcus raised his hand slightly, cutting him off without a word. He turned to the HR director standing by the door and asked calmly, "Has the crew been identified?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. The flight team is being held from departure." That's when the unexpected twist landed. Marcus looked around the room and said, "I'm not here to cancel a contract. I already did that mid-flight." He paused, letting the weight of those words hang. "What I want now is accountability." There was silence. Then he pulled out his phone, opened a group video call, and introduced several passengers from the flight, each of whom had faced similar treatment in the past. Some had written complaints, others had quietly let it go. None had ever heard back. "I'm giving them a voice, and this company a choice," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "Either we change this culture, or I'll take the story straight to the boardroom press." The room fell into stunned silence. The executives exchanged nervous glances. Marcus had taken what could have been a quiet complaint and turned it into a defining moment, not just for the airline, but for every person who'd ever been judged before being heard. The HR director slowly nodded and promised an immediate investigation. Within hours, the flight crew was grounded, pending review. The lead attendant, pale and stunned, was informed her behavior had been documented by passengers, by internal systems, and now, by the world. Later that day, Marcus released a short statement online. It didn't name the crew or attack the airline. Instead, it focused on dignity, respect, and what it truly means to lead. He reminded people that titles mean nothing without action, and real change starts when the silence breaks. The video clip had already reached millions, with hashtag flying while black and hashtag respecting